Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the sixth session in the Spring 2024 Sonoikis Digital Classics program. This semester is focused around digital approaches to cultural heritage. And this week we're talking about Wikidata and Wikimedia and the use of these resources for collaboration and authority data, named entity recognition and similar. And we have a very exciting session lined up with contributions from Berti, who you may have met before, from Hummell Chen, who if you've been following Synoikis for the last recent years, you almost certainly will have also met before, and also in absentia, we will be hearing from Ilaria Bucci, who is also speaking about one of these projects. In a minute, I'll hand over to Monica, who's going to give a first sort of general introduction to named entity recognition and mentioning one of her projects. And then after that, Anne and Ilaria will talk a bit more about a couple of projects in this area. I'm going to start in a minute with a very quick definition and a couple of points, but I also want to put this in the context of the semester. And we've had a session a few weeks ago on aspects of annotation and disambiguation. There was Recogito was introduced, and a couple of other projects. And the sorts of disambiguation we talked about there were using gazetteer records to disambiguate place information. And when we're talking about using Wikidata as authority data, we're doing the same sort of thing. Wikidata might be a disambiguator for place or for people or for other kinds of entities. They can be, institutions or events or various other things that can be defined in there. So this fits in the context of that, and there'll be another session in a few weeks' time, which is going to be on linked open data and heritage data, and that will also intersect fairly neatly with this session. We'll be looking at various other kinds of authorities and vocabularies and ontologies that work together with this. So there'll be quite a nice sort of synergy between those three sessions eventually. So just very briefly, I want to sort of set the scene by talking about a family of resources, one of which at least is going to be very familiar to everybody, which is the Wikimedia family of resources. And if you haven't come across Wikimedia or any of the other resources that make up part of this family, you certainly have come across Wikipedia. And you may think this is an extremely valuable and useful resource. You may recognize the fact that it appears very high in the list of results in almost every Google search that you might possibly do, or you may absolutely hate it. You may have been warned by previous professors to never use it. You may find errors in it, or you may have in the past attempted to edit it and had your edits reverted, by a fascist or something. All sorts of things might have happened that might cause you to be uncomfortable with this resource. Or you may love it, and you may think it's an absolutely fantastic resource that you personally edit at least once or twice a day, as I do. But in any case, you can't have missed that it exists. Other resources in the Wikimedia family that you may or may not have come across include other sort of wiki-like resources, such as WikiQuote, which has pages grouped around individuals or other entities, and collects together meaningful or important or notable quotations by that person. It's a useful kind of collection of resources. You may have come across Wikisource, which is a resource that we often talk about in digital humanities context and digital classics context in particular, as it's a massive collection of copyright-free textual sources that can be used for all sorts of sort of large-scale work. So there's a lot of Latin text and a lot of Greek text, among other things, are in Wikisource that can be taken and downloaded and used sort of very freely in all sorts of ways. The sort of parallel to that is Wikimedia Commons, which is a collection of media of various kinds, largely photographs, but also other kinds of media, which again are in some sense either out of copyright or Creative Commons licensed by the photographer or artist, such that you have resources connected to all sorts of other things. This is the source of all the images that you see in Wikipedia pages. These have all been taken from, or almost all been taken from, Wikimedia Commons collections, and there are millions and millions and millions of photographs in there that have often been tagged in various ways, so they can be found and referenced and reused, and they're very clearly noted as to what kind of license they're available under, which might include the large number of them that have no copyright status whatsoever, that they're public domain. The thing that makes all of these resources work together, so if you're in Wikipedia, you're looking at the page for a person, and at the bottom of that page it says, you will also find notable quotes about this person here, you will find primary works by this person here, you will find images related to this person here, and so forth. The thing that links all of these together is a linked open data database, a graph database that sits behind all of these. It acts in some ways as a spine, or as a set of pathways through and between and among resources within each and between each of these resources and many other resources, is this database called Wikidata. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. Wikidata it has a lot more stability, although it is still publicly editable and contributable to, and we hope you will, at least in a small way, as a result of this session, contribute something to Wikidata. It is a lot more stable and a lot less problematic than Wikipedia, simply because the Wikidata entry for Julius Caesar, say, remains true as a reference to Julius Caesar. You can use it to disambiguate your data by saying, this is the Julius Caesar I mean, regardless of a lot of the individual statements within that page. So you might think that the Wikipedia page for Julius Caesar is terrible because it makes all sorts of mistakes, that almost all of the citations it gives are more than 30 years old, whereas there's been a massive transformation in our academic understanding of the history of Julius Caesar in the last few years that is not reflected in the page at all. All sorts of things might be wrong with it. None of those things impact on the fact that the Wikidata page says, this is Julius Caesar. That part remains true. That is to say, there's no problems with it at all, that there's never any issues with it, that the pages can't be vandalized and things, all the things that we know can happen with collaborative resources, but it does give it much more stability, which means that you can, just as you can say by following a particular using a particular URI, which is also the URL of the page for Athens in the Pleiades Gazetteer, you can use this to say, this is the Athens that I mean. You can use a Wikidata URI to say, this is the Julius Caesar that I mean, of which it might otherwise be ambiguous. So that's just to sort of put a bit of context behind that, and why even if you don't love the Wikimedia family as much as some of us do, Wikidata is still an incredibly powerful, incredibly useful and largely stable resource to use for that. So I think that's as much as I want to say, and I'll hand over to Monica in the first instance, who's going to talk a bit more about Wikidata and how her project uses it in the context of named entity recognition.
Okay, thank you. And so, thank you, Gabby. And today, I will focus now on name entity recognition and Wikidata, and I will explain what I mean by that, and I hope you can see my slides. And so the idea is to see how we can use Wikidata for finding information about proper names in historical languages. And the interesting thing is that Wikidata, and I will show that in a few minutes, offer many pieces of information, but is becoming interesting also because we can include information in the original language, by which I mean in this case past languages, historical languages, and specifically ancient Greek and Latin. Sunoikis Digital Classics, as we know, is focused on the Greco-Roman world, but not only. Today I will refer to projects for Greek and Latin, but of course what I'm saying is valid for many other ancient languages, historical languages, and other civilizations. But I would like to start by defining what we mean by name entity recognition. We have other sessions in Sunoikis Digital Classics about name entity recognition, but I would like to remind what we mean by that. And in this slide, we have a definition taken from this book, Name Entities for Computational Linguistics, which is unfortunately not open access, but in any case, I think it's good to refer to bibliography. And we have a general definition. So name entity recognition is a task of information extraction for finding mentions of name entities in the text and classify their types into categories corresponding to proper names, quantities of interest, such as people, places, organizations, etc. So basically, the goal of name entity recognition is to look for, let's say, proper names, which is really a very wide category. But name entity recognition is today is used in many projects in digital humanities, in computer science, especially for modern and contemporary languages, and especially English, where we can find these categories. But name entity recognition is also interesting for historical text and ancient text, because in our sources we have many name entities, by which I mean in general proper names, that are interesting for many reasons, for many researches in the fields of history, philology, archaeology, and so on. And in fact, Gabi already mentioned that before, and we have many sessions in Sunoikis Digital Classics since the beginning, where we discussed how we can search, look for, annotate, represent, extract proper names in general. And name entity recognition is definitely an interesting task. And we can use this method, we can try to use this method also for extracting proper names from ancient sources. Of course, there are many difficulties for historical languages and ancient text, because this is due to the complexities of these languages. For example, ancient Greek and Latin are highly inflected languages. We still miss data and also sources, even if today we have many sources in digital format, still we need more sources. But in any case, so this task is now used, and there are various projects experimenting with name entity recognition. I also have here a general definition, if you're interested, in a Wikipedia entry about name entity recognition, where you can find in English an introduction to this task, with a simple example, in this case from a modern text. Jim bought 300 shares of Acme Corporation in 2006. So this 2006. So this is an example where we definitely have different name entities, like Jim, who is a person, and then we have an organization, and then we also have a number, in this case referring to a year. So this is a very simple example where we can find name entities. But of course, if we want to use name entity recognition for ancient Greek and Latin, we have more complexities. Just as a brief overview, so the state of the art today. focusing on these two ancient languages. In this slide, I'm referring to projects that today are experimenting with this method for trying to identify and extract in ancient sources proper names. So as you can see, we have experiments and results for Latin. The Herodotus project, for example, has produced a tagger for Latin, which is now ingested in Recogito. Recogito, an annotation platform that was presented many times in Sunoikisis, and also in a few weeks ago in this Sunoikisis semester. And then there are other projects, and I'm working on that also for ancient Greek. In this slide, you also have the links to two specific sections, Sunoikis digital classes sessions on name entity extraction. They were held in 2016-17, and then last year we had a session on Wikidata, and we also mentioned name entity recognition and extraction. And then you have also other links, in this case to specific projects that I'm working on for name entity recognition. Today the goal is not to talk about these projects. I'm mentioning them in this slide, and of course you have the links and you can check them. Moving on, just to, if you wanted to experiment a bit, given that Recogito was mentioned before, for example, the Herodotus Latin NER plugin is now in Recogito, in the recognition engines, and so you can experiment with Latin. If you have a text in Latin, you can through Recogito automatically identify proper names in Latin text. We don't have yet an engine for ancient Greek, and the rest, as you can see, is for modern languages, which means translations of ancient text into modern languages, like English, French, German, or Spanish, as you can see in this slide. And there are other possibilities, of course, other methods for experimenting with name entity recognition. I would like to mention the possibilities of aligning text. For example, in this case, I have a screenshot from another project where we have ancient Greek text and Latin translations, the Latin of the 19th century, where we can measure the distance between the Greek and the Latin. And in this case, translation alignment is a good technique for trying to individuate proper names, so name entities, because if you consider these two texts, for example, on the left you have an ancient Greek text, and on the right you have the Latin translation. Proper names, which are conventionally capitalized in modern editions, can be identified. Not really easily, but it's easier to identify these elements than other common nouns. And also in this case, I'm giving you some bibliography. We have been experimenting with automatic translation alignment for ancient Greek and Latin, which is another task of natural language processing, and in general also in digital classics. These are experiments that are currently done, and as part of this task, so to try to automatize the alignment, where we have of course still many difficulties and complexities, a sub-task is also to identify through the alignment proper names. And I'm saying that because the problem, for example, for ancient Greek is that we still miss data for proper names in ancient Greek, and so we want to try to get these data not with a traditional approach where we annotate a text by reading a Greek text, but we try to automatically identify, for example, through another language like Latin or also modern languages, these entities, and then of course we can check them. In terms of data, we should mention authority lists, and then here I will arrive to Wikidata. So by authority lists and knowledge bases, we mean today, roughly, we mean collections and databases of proper names. And today, for ancient Greek and Latin, we have different projects and different authority lists, including proper names in ancient Greek or in Latin. Examples are the Lexicon of Greek personal names, the Pleiades Gazetteer, that is mentioned a lot in our Sunoikisis sessions for place names, Trismegistos, and specifically for persons, Trismegistos people, and project working on using name entities is also SNAP for ancient prosopographies, because of course prosopographies are based on also on name entities. And then we have other resources. So the first 4 resources are resources specific for ancient Greek and Latin, for ancient languages. We can mention other projects, of course, but these are today not the most important ones, but at least projects where we have a lot of data, and then and they are also open. And then we have other projects and other resources like the Virtual International Authority file and DBpedia, and also Wikidata. And these are projects not born for classical languages, historical languages, but are authority lists and knowledge bases where we can find also information about ancient text. And for example, the Virtual International Authority file VIAF is ingesting data from the Perseus catalog and the Perseus digital library. So this is an interesting aspect. And this is an example for the Virtual International Authority file. In this case, I'm showing you, of course, the interface of this resource, where we can also find, for example, information about ancient authors. And here you have an entry about Archestratos, an ancient Greek poet. In this case, this resource ingests information about this author from many different resources, including the Perseus catalog. The problem is that we don't find, in this case, information in ancient Greek. For example, in this case, we have modern Greek, but not ancient Greek. But still, of course, this resource is important because it ingests metadata from many external resources, especially libraries and catalogs. For example, in this case, we are talking about an ancient Greek poet. And so this resource is really important for also for name entities, because if we are working with personal names, and in this specific case on author names, VIAF provides us with metadata about people, and specifically about authors. Wikidata is another interesting resource for our goal, in the sense that Wikidata includes also information about proper names in general. And Gabby already mentioned Wikidata before, defined it before. I hope you can see my browser. I'm in the browser now. And we have a clear definition here if we open Wikidata. So Wikidata is a free and open knowledge base that can be read and edited by both humans and machines. This is interesting. So Wikidata ingests data from other Wikimedia resources, with other Wikimedia projects automatically, but of course can be also edited by human beings. And basically Wikidata is the central storage for the structured data of its Wikimedia sister projects, including Wikipedia, Wikivoyage, etc. Sorry, going back to my slides, I have here an example I mentioned before, the ancient Greek poet Archestratos in this slide, and I can open also the corresponding entry in Wikidata. The interesting thing is that Wikidata offers many statements for each entry. In this case, I'm showing the entry about an ancient Greek poet. So we have a name Archestratos, which is first of all a personal name in ancient Greek. In this case, we can disambiguate Archestratos because this Archestratos was an ancient Greek poet. And the interesting thing is that in Wikidata, we have really many statements about this, in this case, this poet, and links to many external resources. And the interesting thing in this case is that so there is a language to represent this information. So these statements, there are many statements in Wikidata used for many different fields, for many different domains, where we can really cover a huge amount of data, starting from basic information about the name of a specific person, in this case Archestratos, the chronology, the language, in this case the literature, and then many other data and metadata gathered from external resources, especially catalogs. For example, in this entry about Archestratos, we have IDs, in this case from the Thesaurus Lingua Greca, from the Perseus catalog, and many other libraries, international and national libraries, where we have metadata, including also references to editions, for example, or commentaries about this specific author. And I would like to give you an example where we can, so just to show this connection between name entities and Wikidata, how we can use this resource Wikidata. Of course, we should devote an entire Sunoikis Digital Classics semester to Wikidata because it's a very interesting and complex resource. But I would like to give you an example. This is in ancient Greek, and so maybe some of you doesn't read ancient Greek, but still what we see here is a text annotated. So in this interface, this is an annotation environment where we have a short text, 6 sentences. Specifically, we have an entry of the Greek Byzantine lexicon Suda about a philosopher, Aristocles, from Messene in Italy, a philosopher. And in this entry, we have annotations of proper names in general. And we can, even if we don't read the ancient Greek, through this interface, we can individuate the 3 layers of annotation, because we have first in gray the lemma for each inflected form, for example, in this case. Then we have in green the layer with the so-called name entity, so where we can disambiguate if a word or a token is a personal name, a place name, an organization, or something else. And then we have a third layer where we further disambiguate these entities, these proper names. In the first case, we have an interesting example, because we have 3 entities: the name of a person, then an adjective deriving from a location, and then a place name, that together constitutes a real entity. So we have Aristocles, who is a personal name in ancient Greek. Then we have an adjective referring to the place where this Aristocles was active or was born, Messene, Messenios, from Messeni, tes Italias, in Italy. And so if we can combine these entities and we can disambiguate, and these 3 entities together in this text, they correspond to a real entity. The real entity is Aristocles of Messene, the philosopher. And in the third layer of annotation, the interesting thing is that in this environment, we can not only identify our author, and we see here the Greek text, but we can also ingest information live from Wikidata. And here you can see that we have, for this identifier, we have behind this interface, we have a connection with the entry in Wikidata about this specific author, Aristocles of Messene, which is interesting because in this case, as you can see, we can connect different resources, we can link different resources, in this case, annotations in the original language, which is ancient Greek, with metadata provided by Wikidata, where we really have a lot of metadata. At the same time, we can contribute to Wikidata because by annotating a text like this, we can provide Wikidata with linguistic data in the original language. I would like to go back to my browser to comment, to say just a few things about Wikidata. As you can see in this page, this is again the page about Archestrotus. Of course, Wikidata is interesting, but can be a bit overwhelming in the sense that we can find many statements in the same page, and as an editor, here I can add many other statements. So Wikidata provides many statements. The problem is that, for example, for ancient literature, ancient Greek and Latin literature, the complexity is due to the fact that we have sometimes too many statements, which is good because, of course, when we want to define ancient authors, we need different statements if we consider, for example, literary genres. But the problem is that as a community today, I think we should try to find an agreement on the language that we want to use in Wikidata, because if we are not consistent, the risk is that then we can't find information in Wikidata. And to conclude, I have an example of a query. When there is a Wikidata query service where we can search information in Wikidata, and in this case, this is a query to find orations by author. So, and in this case, I'm using a specific language for this query, and as you can see in this case, I can, for example, in here I can look for any instance of an oration whose author is, and then of course I can specify, for example, in this case I have the author Demosthenes, and if I run the query, of course I can find the orations of Demosthenes in Wikidata. The problem is that sometimes if we are not consistent, the risk is that we may not find every information about, for example, a specific author or every oration, because the important thing is that we should try to be consistent when we, for example, try to insert a statement about a specific author, his or her genre, and his or her work. So I think, as Gabby was saying at the beginning, so in Wikidata we have many possibilities. This is the interesting thing. So this is a resource that historians and philologists should use, but given that is open and it offers so many possibilities, in this case in terms of statements and the language and the ontology, we should sit as a community and try to agree. It's difficult to agree, of course, but try to begin to understand the complexity of these statements for representing a specific field of a specific domain. In this case, for example, for proper names, name entities, or for example, for ancient literature, or maybe also for archaeology. And I know that Annie is going to talk about this. So I have, okay, so I finished, let's say, my part. So I can, so I think that Anne can, I don't know if there are questions, and so I lost you because I had my slides in front of me. So I think that we can discuss this part after, at the end of the session. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Monica. Let's go straight over to Anne, who's also going to give us a bit of Ilaria, I think, as part of this.
Yes, exactly. Thank you again to Gabby and to Monica for having us here today. I will be speaking on behalf of the IDEA team. I'll be talking a little bit about our project and some overarching, um, well, giving you a sense of our aims and why we're working in Wikidata and why it's important to work in the way that we are. And then I'll move to demoing to show you some of the pieces in Wikidata that we're finding useful for the kind of work that we're trying to undertake. And then my colleague, Ilaria Bucci, who has been heading the inscriptions end of our project, couldn't be here today, but has pre-recorded a little video demoing some of the more inscriptional specific work that she's been heading up in Wikidata. So I'll move over to my slides now. So Gabby and Monica, just let me know if for some reason they're not showing up, and I'm
All
at the
good.
very end of them. Okay. Are you seeing them?
Yep, it's all good.
Okay. All right. Great. So I am the director of this project that we call IDEA. So it's the International Digital Dura Europos Archive. We've generously been funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. That's a humanities entity in the United States. And what we're trying to do is to use linked open data methods, and specifically the Wikidata and Wikimedia Commons platforms, to digitally reassemble materials that are in separate collections, that different classes of content that have been modeled or published independently of one another. With that, we're trying to provide more context for these kind of dispersed artifacts and classes of materials. And while doing that, that's good for everybody who wants to learn something about Dura Europos, but we're also trying to be very conscious of improving inequalities in access. And it's part of the reason why we are working in the Wikimedia family of resources. So in case you're not familiar, the case study that we are speaking about is based on the city of Dura Europos, which is in modern Syria. It's on the western bank of the Euphrates. It was founded around 300 BCE by the Seleucids. It goes through an Arsacid or Parthian phase and then a Roman phase. And in the Roman phase then is besieged and conquered by the Sasanians around 256 CE. So just to give you a kind of chronological reference point there. So Dura was first excavated when Syria was under the French mandate in the 1920s and 30s. And it's thanks to those early excavations that many of the artifacts from the site have landed in Western collections. So Dura is one of these big dig archaeological sites from the dawn of the discipline, where there's entanglements with Western imperialism that mean that there are problematic repercussions that amount to knowledge siloing that privileges the West. So by this, I mean that there's historical political dynamics at the moment of those first systematic excavations that have left ripple effects in their wake that continue to shape the realities of who doesn't and who does have easy access to information that descends from those early power imbalances. But then those access and unequal power dynamics then translate into biases in whose perspectives are reflected in the archival content associated with the site. So for instance, Jennifer Baird, her work has drawn attention to the ways in which metadata associated with images like the one that I'm showing you here frequently name the American and French figures while leaving wholly unacknowledged the presence of the numerous workers who are also pictured here, and without whose labor we wouldn't know what we know today about Dura. So IDEA is committed to trying to do our part to chip away at those legacies, and we're using Wikidata primarily to do it. So like many analogous sites, in the case of Dura, partage agreements and these well-intentioned efforts to kind of share out artifacts from this important site into museum collections beyond those partage institutions means that at least a dozen collections worldwide hold Dura artifacts. There's an even greater number of institutions that hold archival content that helps to contextualize the artifacts and buildings that were discovered at the site. Remember that archaeology inherently is destructive, so archival documentation is really critical here. So as institutions increasingly digitize content and digital databases proliferate, much of that is done around institutional lines or around the parameters of different kinds of materials. So inscriptions, papyri, coin hoards, there's linked open data projects associated with all of those. So one of our main ambitions, as I kind of gestured to at the outset, is to build on these digitization efforts to try to draw back together object assemblages that have been fragmented across different publications, standalone databases, and institutional collections. And we're tethering all of this content back to the locations on the site using gazetteer entities. So the key to the power and the flexibility of linked open data in general, but especially for Wikidata's multilingualism, is that each and every fact or interpretation can be parsed into a three-part statement with a subject, predicate, object. And that idea, at least in the Wikidata context, can then be anchored with a bibliographic citation. So if a record for each part of this three-part statement lives on the internet in a stable place that never moves and is assigned a language agnostic code, and that's the function of the P numbers and the Q numbers that you see marked in the schematic here, then the equivalent translation in each world language for the concept in question can be mapped to that language agnostic code. And this is what drives the multilinguistic search. So even if our team makes an initial statement in English, through the power of the Wikidata community and so much of the translation work that has been done on a lot of the metadata fields that we use, even if our team is making that initial statement in English, it's possible for others to search and read most of our statements in their own native language without our team having to directly translate every metadata statement. So ultimately, this means that the demo searches that I'll be showing you in just a minute in English in Wikidata can also be done in Arabic, for instance. So what do I mean in practical terms about what it is that our project is actually doing? On a practical level, what our team is doing is archival research about the site, but we're doing that archival research in a handful of primarily Western languages. So a lot of the information about this particular site, because of the legacies of the power dynamics at the time of first excavation, most of the publications are in either English or in French. And they're published in volumes and journals that not all institutions have access to. And so we are parsing out information from the published record into these computer readable clusters. So to accomplish this, again, on a practical level, we are systematically creating and digitally networking Wikidata records for the site's buildings and other significant features, the artifacts, the archival documents, the major events at the site, the people, both ancient and modern, and for bibliography. So I know that this is a lot to take in the abstract. That's why I'm going to walk you through this when I switch over to Wikidata in just a moment to help illustrate how all of this works. But ultimately, if you're thinking in terms of those kernels of knowledge that can be parsed into those language agnostic subject, predicate, object statements, it becomes clear that there's a great deal of archaeological knowledge about sites like Dura that can be expressed as a network of relationships among people, places, events, things, and bibliography. The publications in this ecosystem also anchor the statements expressed about artifacts and buildings and events, but I've omitted those in the schematic that I'm showing you here in order to keep it more legible. So we, as scholars and students who read the literature that is overwhelmingly in English, French, and other Western languages, and equally importantly, we who have access to these publications via our institutions, we can understand the relationships among these different entities, and we can express that in Wikidata to begin bridging language and access barriers. So note too that, while I'm kind of leaning on the fact that this has implications for equity, it also has very practical benefits for anyone who's interested in the content, since competing naming traditions for buildings and sites, or coincident names that are shared among individuals, those kinds of things complicate keyword searching or traditional keyword searching for anybody. Oops. So ultimately, if we are expressing this network of relationships in Wikidata, it means that we're building an open data set that other projects can make use of. So a project on Roman temples across the empire, for instance, or the Roman amphitheater query that I have given you as a possible exercise to try your own hand with manipulating a query. Projects that are not focused on exactly the same thing that we are can pull from the work that we've already done on the Dura data set. So for instance, a project on Roman temples could pull in the data that we have done for the Roman temples, or a project on Roman amphitheaters similarly. So this work also creates an infrastructure that opens up the possibility of collaborating remotely with Syrian stakeholders. In our case, we are working with cultural heritage professionals right now, and we are starting to pilot work where we will be outreaching to villagers in the town of Saliheh, where there's generations of individuals who've worked on the excavations. And so, as I said, we're piloting this outreach work now, and that work is going to center around the annotation of archival images. So keep that in mind when I demo image annotation in the Wiki ecosystem in just a moment. Wikidata also allows for built-in visualization of data in various formats. So you can do that in timelines or maps or graphs, all drawn from this network of relationships that we're expressing. So let me shift over now to Wikidata to talk you through some of the demos to illustrate what I've been talking about with regard to multilinguistic benefits and those built-in visualizations. Also the usefulness for this digital reassembly of dispersed collections, and the possibilities for collaborative data or metadata enrichment. And then I'll give you a sneak peek of how all of those features can then be used to power a user-friendly interface. So what you're seeing here is the record for the Palmyrene Gate. This is the main gate at Dura Europos. This is part of what we are developing as an urban gazetteer. So a gazetteer at a finer level of granularity than Pleiades has typically gone down to in the content that they cover. We are working in parallel and in collaboration with Pleiades, and I'll give you a little sneak peek at how that looks in just a moment. But just to tour you through a Wikidata record that can be used as a kind of gazetteer record. Notice that there's the Q number here. That is that language agnostic code that I was talking about. We have a privileged label here. The way that this particular place at Dura Europos is typically referred to in the majority of the scholarship is as the Palmyrene Gate. But there are alternate names that are also used in sometimes older scholarship or scholarship from different traditions. So here you can use the also known as feature in order to gather up alternate ways of calling the same place. One of the reasons this is really important in thinking about equity and access for people who are not who have not had the benefit of full access to the scholarship and whatnot, is that there are oral traditions that have grown up around these sites that have nothing to do with the Western traditions of scholarship around these sites. And you know, those other naming traditions are also valid ways of calling these places. So part of the outreach work that we're doing with the Urban Gazetteer is to have conversations with people in the local communities and to figure out what they call the particular features within the city. And in this case, the gate itself is in translation known as the Gate of the Winds or Gate of the Air. That can be transliterated as Bab al Awa. And so this is important because we can then provide alternate naming traditions in Arabic as well. And by listing out all of these different naming traditions, we are providing searchability for any content associated with the Palmyrene Gate by any of these naming traditions. So as Monica already showed you, Wikidata you know, has these rich individual statements that can ride along with all of this information about named entities. In terms of how a Wikidata record works with regard to that three-part statement, you can think of this part as kind of the subject for each of the statements that will come below. And all of the entities that show up in the gray bar, those are going to be your predicates. So the relationship that drives then the, well, that connects to the other target entity. So these would be the object statement or the object in the statement. Looking at these down below, each and every statement on Wikidata should be referenced with a strong reference. You can see here that we're pointing back to Pleiades. Again, I'll get back to that in just a moment. But you can point to reference URLs for authority projects like Pleiades. But you can also point to particular publications. So in our case, as I said, we're networking, you know, this set of relationships among bibliography as well as the artifacts and the places and all of that. So this is one of the bibliographic records that we are utilizing, and we can point exactly to the pages that back up the statements that we're making. Information about date and images and things like that. Significantly, you can put in coordinate information, but this is just a single coordinate. One of the things that I want to highlight here is that it's also possible in Wikimedia Commons to store geoshapes. So to actually give footprints of buildings. And this is something that we are creating in parallel and linking to our Wikidata records. The idea here is that then, you know, we have stored this information and that can be pulled out at a later time for the purposes of visualization on maps and things like that. There are different events. So one of the things that we are experimenting with right now is starting to collect which buildings or which artifacts were excavated during individual seasons at Dura Europos to be able to visualize that to some extent. So you can see here that this particular gate was excavated under the first couple of seasons primarily. And here I want to show you how the multilinguistic search works. So you can see here this particular gate, it's made from material limestone. If you were to click out to the entity for limestone, you can see here that there is an Arabic equivalent. As in many languages, there is a translation of what we mean by limestone. And that's how it will be possible to query this data in alternate languages, not just in the English interface that I happen to have selected because that's my first language. Another thing that I want to highlight here is the on focus list of Wikimedia project. So every entity that our project manages, we have a statement on the focus list of Wikimedia project, and then we point to our Wikimedia project. Part of the reason for this is that it makes it very easy for us to query all of the content that we're interested in, and then that becomes one of the mechanisms that will help us to run semi-automated checks on the data, to kind of manage alignment and to check for vandalism and things like that. I won't get into that today, but I can address that more in the Q&A if there are questions or further interest in that. Then I will show you that we are starting to think about going into an even finer level of granularity. So in Ilaria's video, you'll see that the particular object that she is talking about, we have a very specific wall that it is associated with in the context of Dura. So we have broken down the gate into a north tower and a south tower, and there are individual rooms within those towers where we have some finds that can be assigned that level of specificity, or in Ilaria's case, there is a particular wall that is a part of one of these towers, and we can provide that also with a geoshape so that we can be very specific about, we don't have coordinates of exactly where this object was found 100 years ago, but we have enough information to be able to put it rather close back to its original find spot. And this is how we start to be able to at least gesture at the original assemblage of objects that were found associated in a particular part of the site. Here, under identifiers are kind of those authority projects in the larger linked open data ecosystem, like Pleiades, that we are linking out to. So if you were to click here, you can see this is the stable record for the Palmyrene Gate that our team created, and that is tethered back to the Wikidata item. And part of how we can look to manage alignment in the future. I think that kind of does it. Well, and I guess maybe one thing that might be helpful to say is that we are thinking of Wikidata as kind of an in-between area between a lot of other linked open data projects and a lot of other authorities, where we as a group of scholars and students who are invested in this site can kind of work together to pull those digital pieces together using mechanisms like the identifiers in order to connect up all the pieces. So let me show you, I'll move over to a query. I wanted to show you that when you have objects that cite the gazetteer entities that we have assigned either coordinates or geoshapes in Wikidata, if you construct a query and ask the query to show you entities that were found at Dura Europos that have a location of discovery, you are presented with something like this. And since we've been focusing on the Palmyrene Gates, I'll just show you here that there's a whole cluster of artifacts that have been found at the Palmyrene Gate. So this is the particular altar that Ilaria is going to be talking about as her example case study. But there are also other entities, say this one, that is in a different collection from the one at the Yale University Art Gallery. This one is at a separate Yale collection. And so previously it hadn't been possible to even see these things together. To search for these things together because they were managed by separate institutions, even under the same overarching umbrella institutional access. This becomes even more complicated if you think about the fact that there are also objects at the Louvre, there are objects in Damascus and whatnot. So this is using that gazetteer entity of the Palmyrene Gate each and every one of these artifacts has a record that then has a location of discovery Palmyrene gate that cites the original Palmyrene gate entity that I showed you. And then because the Palmyrene gate has a geocoordinate associated with it, we can ask Wikidata to visualize that for us. So that's quite nice. The other query that I wanted to show you, this is the based on the work of Jasmine Sahu, who has done an amazing job with the papyri in Wikidata that come from papyri and parchments. And I've asked here for Wikidata to show me all of the papyri and parchments that come from Duriaropos and to tell me what kind of thing they are. So then I wanted to show you, we can go into the graph builder, and it's just as easy as pulling these labels into different fields and turning it into a bar graph, and all of a sudden I can visualize how many of these materials are accounts or dockets or letters, etc. You can also manipulate the query that I've provided for you on Roman amphitheaters in a similar way. While I'm doing this, it might be useful here to also show you that it's possible to change the language interface of the query service. Let me see. Here we go. And then you can see that not everything is translated, but a lot of the navigational tools are. Also here, I have asked for all of the results to be shown in English. So I would need to change the language code in here. I could change it also to Arabic in order to show all of the results, pulling in those stored values from the Arabic fields rather than from the English fields. But I think you get the point. Go back to the English. All right, so that's that. Last thing I'd like to show you is, well, no, two more things I'd like to show you are image annotation in Wikidata. So there is a tool called the Image Positions tool in Wikidata that allows you to make annotations directly on a photograph or, on a photograph, and to create depict statements that append to a particular Wikidata item. So I'm going to show you here. We have had a brilliant Yale undergraduate student named Mary Jiang, whose work this is. She has worked from the open image annotator tool, and she has refined it specifically for us to use in the classroom, where it's pre-fed with the photographs that we're interested in playing with. And so if I bring up one of these photographs, this is the record for this particular archival photograph. And if we look down here, right now, it only says that it depicts Tower 15. That is metadata that we inherited from the institution. And that was the way that it was marked up by archaeologists. You can see that there are a lot of people in this photograph. And so it is possible to, oh, of course, I'm not logged in. Just a moment. All right, so sorry, take those few steps again. So we go into the dashboard, find a photograph that I want to edit or that I want to annotate. Go into this photograph, and I can come down here and I can say, well, there are actually humans that are depicted in this photograph. I can add that statement. Then I tell it to allow me to add a region, and I can annotate this particular person. I could do that numerous times and actually annotate each of the individuals that appears in this photograph. And this could also be done for Tower 15, for instance. If I have not done the work yet to be sure that this is in fact Tower 15 in the background, but we could draw a box around Tower 15 within the entity in order to clarify that. I also want to say that, while this is showing in the English interface, these annotations, if I were to be using this in an Arabic interface, these annotations should come up with the Arabic labels instead. All of this then gets written back to the archival photograph, to the depict statements here. So there will be an added value that should say depicts human. And then there would be a little target series of coordinates within the image that specifies what part of that image corresponds to the thing depicted. So this is a pretty cool feature. Then I'll just move over to show you that we are thinking about Wikidata as kind of a back end for our project. And so one of the things that we are doing is building an interface that sits over Wikidata, but doesn't store any information. It's all powered by queries that call out to Wikidata and pull in information. So that could be visualizations. We're working on that to kind of power some visualizations drawn from the network of relationships that we're building in Wikidata. You can also search the collections here. So part of how this is populated is using that on focus list of Wikimedia project idea statement that I showed you on the Palmyrene gate. So this is very much work in progress. So I will just talk you through a little bit of what's to come and what you can already see so far that is kind of exciting. It is a little bit laggy when I am on the Zoom call, and it is calling out to Wikidata, and it takes a moment for it to populate. But for instance, I have asked for a particular historical person, this Julius Terentius, and you see that you are getting archival photographs that are associated with that name. You're getting an inscription that happens to be associated with the same individual that is also depicted in this image. If you were to click on this record, this is pulling from the record associated with this particular painting, but we have a statement that resides on Wikidata that tells us where to find a deep zoom image that can be pulled into a IIIF viewer. Those annotations that I was talking about, these can be pulled into the front end viewer as well, so that you can actually see which figure is Julius Terentius. Again, remember that because of the nature of the multilinguality of Wikidata, all of the content that you're seeing right now, we're developing in English, but in the next year or so, we are crosswalking so that it should be possible to view all of this content, pulling from Wikidata, but in the Arabic interface. We can parse out significant information into maps. This is not working yet the way that we have it planned, but just to show you that there will be a map feature. You can pull in records for relevant people. You can parse information from the Wikidata into a neat timeline. You have the Wikidata statement here, or sorry, the Wikidata record here if you prefer to look at it that way. There's a dashboard for different kinds of stats that are associated with the entity. And then significantly, each and every one of those resources that backs up the statements that we're making is then pulled into a tab down below. And I want to show you what happens when you have statements that are made from an open access resource. So specifically on this one, I know that there is an open access resource that has been cited. So you could click directly on this. Oh no, of course, that's what happens when you're demoing something. But there it is. The specific article that we are citing is accessible directly from the platform. So this is part of how we're thinking about Wikidata as kind of drawing together a lot of the resources that exist out there. So I will, I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment now and then move it over to a video that my colleague Ilaria has prepared. So maybe.
Just a note in the meantime that we are cutting fairly close to our time limit. If the video is 15 minutes, we will not have time for discussion at that point. So if anyone online wants to ask questions, drop them in the chat while we're going, and then we'll see if we've got a couple of minutes to get to them at the very end.
Or we could also just post the video for watching asynchronously if you would prefer. So it's kind of up to you all in the driver's seat.
Either way, we do kind of want people to watch them, so we might as well put it on now if we can get the audio working. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let me see.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ilaria Bucci, and I'm a member of the IDEA project. I'm sorry that I could not be with you today. I've been mainly working on inscription and documentation within IDEA, so I would like to present an example of what we're doing with yours inscriptions. But before doing that, I wanted to give you a bit of context. So as for many archaeological sites, especially for this area and period, the editions of the texts from Europe are dispersed across several sources, often compiled with different purposes by specialists in different disciplines, and these are not easy to navigate. The creation of a complete corpus, including all the texts and languages attested at the site, is therefore compelling, and it is what we want to do to facilitate and ease the access to this incredible amount of data, and of course enhance our knowledge of ancient Europus, but also promote the preservation of this very rich, multilingual, culturally and religiously diverse heritage. So harnessing the potential of being linked open data, and especially Wikidata, we want to model inscriptional content and collect and link archival data and existing editions. Our aim is to create a comprehensive linked database that would be easily accessible to academic communities worldwide and the general public. In practical terms, what we're trying to do is to represent in Wikidata the same information that we would want to have in an epigraphic database, and that would be relevant for archaeological, historical, epigraphical studies, etc. Our workflow involves the collection of data into a spreadsheet, so it's very simple, and its organized spreadsheet is organized in a way that reflects our schema in Wikidata, so it's easier to translate the information from the spreadsheet into Wikidata. Mostly, we will do that mostly using OpenDefine. I just want to stress the importance of the work that IDEA is doing, which is pioneering and is not isolated. In particular, when it comes to ancient inscriptions, there is a fair amount, again, of ancient texts that are already represented in Wikidata. They are often, of course, modeled in slightly different ways. Some are more granular, some are less granular, but what it's important is that together with other projects, such as Wikiproject Antiquity and Wikiproject Epigraphy, what we're trying to do as a community is to find a way that would be to model, again, inscriptional content that would be as consistent as possible, in order to ease both the access and the extraction of information for both specialists, and general audiences and non-specialist audiences. Of IDEA is at the moment one of the, I would say, the largest, most substantial contributions in this regard. Going back to our object then, just to give you an example, I think this probably is the picture that kind of shows you probably better the object in context. This one, perhaps. So we're talking about a fairly small hexagonal altar. It's like only 35 centimeters high, was found at the Palmyrin Gate, so-called Palmyrin Gate at Europus, together with other altars and sculptures in what appears to be a place of worship, like a sacred place at the gate. His object was broken and restored in antiquity with a thick layer of mortar kind of thing. You can definitely see it in the picture. Later in time, we don't know exactly when, these two pieces were separated. And they were, again, already separated, most likely when they reached Yale, where the object is currently preserved, because they were attributed to different accession numbers. This is a nice example of artifact reconstitution. Kind of zooming in a bit and to see again more in detail what we have been doing in terms of modeling or Wikidata modeling. You have again here the entry for the item we were discussing, so this hexagonal altar. I would say that it looks like at least kind of the first section looks like all the other items. So you have a main label, a description, and both of them can be translated in I would say hundreds of different languages, which is the beauty of the multilingual capacity of Wikidata. So you have here the English and Arabic version of both label and description, and the column on the right that is labeled also known as includes all the aliases that you can add, like potentially again an infinite number, and they can be quite handy. I would say in general, especially when it comes to artifacts like from different collections and museums, maybe they have traveled, they have received different numbers, or when it comes to inscriptions, I would say it's particularly useful for concordances. So I know it may sound unoriginal, definitely a bit boring, but issues of numeration when we're talking about different epigraphic corpora, that can be quite painful in so many ways. But yeah, so again, having at least a few of the main identifiers for the texts in this kind of first section at the beginning can be very, very helpful. In this case in particular, because you have a bilingual, it's not exactly bilingual, so you have two inscriptions. One is in Palmyrene Aramaic and the other is a graffito in Greek. That do clearly kind of point to different corpora. One is the PAT, Palmyrene Aramaic texts, and the other one is Supplemento Epigraphico in Greco, SEG. So it's particularly helpful. Kind of focusing on the main, I would say, the main body, the main kind of features, the fields in a way. The features, they are recorded and represented, so called statements in Wikidata. The first main one, they would say, embraces a lot of different categories of information. So you have, again, what the item is. In this case, an archaeological artifact, an archaeological find as well, because it was found. It doesn't come from antiquity market, for instance. The type of object, because it's an altar, but it's also an instance of inscription, because it bears written bits. Is an example, of course, cultural property, and based on the content, of course, and the type of object and the content of the inscriptions, it is also an instance of a dedication. So you have a lot of things here that might actually fall into different categories in other epigraphic databases, for instance. Again, like we're talking about type of objects, especially, and genre as well. But the reason why we decided to kind of embrace all of this information here is to ensure the queryability from different angles as well. Another interesting statement is that part of that allows you basically to connect the object to the season of excavation when the object was found, and is particularly, again, helpful when you want to query for all the objects or inscriptions or coins or whatever is the artifact again you're looking for, but that they were found in the course of the same expedition for whatever reason. Of course, that could be. Inception gives you the dates, and I would say, again, is particularly interesting the way you can model dates in Wikidata, because again, Wikidata allows you multiple and even conflicting values. In this instance in particular, you can see there are at least kind of two values for this statement. So one is a range, this is kind of the Protus one, and the second one is after the kind of parting wars of Lucius Verus, basically, and the kind of, the end of this bracket is always to follow the city because it was conquered by the Sasanians. But the point is that you have references, so you can definitely point to, again, the person, the group of people, the website, the collection, the publication that gives you that information. And even if it's conflicting, it's just kind of a better way to illustrate also disagreements in scholarship. In this case, it's probably, I guess, just a genuine, not mistake, but maybe an inaccuracy to keep like such a broad bracket in this case. And it's also funny because from the same website, you do have two different, again, brackets, but it's something that happens quite often. And if you don't have a date in this inscription, often enough, the archaeological context is not, again, enough to give you certainty about the date of an object. So again, but the beauty of it is that, again, several values, even conflicting ones, can exist in the same entry. And then you have like an entire section dedicated to images, which is particularly rich. And this is thanks to the work the IDEA has been doing with archival photographs. There are like two main. There are from the Yale University Art Gallery, but then you have a lot of the archival photographs of the objects, either of the object, in this case the altar, in context, but also immediately after the excavations. And this is, again, is very interesting. It gives you, I guess, access to the object at different stages of its existence, but also it's very important when it comes to analyzing the original context of an artifact. Location, which is, again, currently preserved in New Haven. Genre is a kind of the it's a bit the complement to what we had this instance of at the beginning. So is a general kind of instance of sculpture as well. Then we have creator. In this case, we don't know about. We're not sure about the creator. We have language of work or name. Of course, multiple values are allowed here as well. No problem. In this case, we have two short texts. One is again is a kind of a lapidary inscription in Palmyrene Aramaic, and the other is a Greek graffido. Inscriptions and two scripts. We have both collection and inventory number in terms of statements. It's just, again, a kind of way to ensure that objects will be traceable, both starting from the collection and from the inventory number. Of course, we're talking about Yale University Art Gallery. We have the place where the object was made. We have no reason to believe that it was made elsewhere, so it's to Europos. Again, writing system with reference to both the texts that are on the object, discovery date, that is, again, kind of connected to the season of excavations, discovery place, that can be quite granular. So we have modeled this in a quite granular way. So it's not only the Europos, it's quite general, but also thanks to the information in the preliminary report, we know that it was found at Palmyrene Gate, and we know against which wall it was placed. So we have, again, a quite precise reference to that. And if you click on the wall, it will lead you, of course, to a new Wikidata entry, and ultimately to the geoshape, where you can literally locate the piece, the part of the south wall of the passage of the gate that identifies wall 64. Information about dimensions. Also, again, interesting because on the Yale University Art Gallery website, of course, being the two pieces separated, you only have a maximum height that is not the complete one, that actually is included in the preliminary report, copyright status, and then, of course, kind of bibliography. So the main one is inspired by source, and that would be the preliminary report, in this case, the first on focus list of Wikimedia project idea. Information about the state of conservation is also recorded, and the object is damaged in the sense that it's preserved in two pieces that haven't been restored again. But anyways, that's the state of conservation, the current state of conservation. And we have one of the most important statements of this kind of modeling, in this case for ancient text, is inscription as a statement, and includes the transcription and translation of both the Palmyrene and the Greek texts on the objects with their references. Clearly, what's interesting here, and that we can include, again, as many value as we want, different, again, edition, if you want to have like both. It is possible to have both the diplomatic and interpretive versions, for instance. And another thing that is very, very interesting to note is that we can actually include even potentially conflicting, not just editions, so different readings, of course, which is very, very important where a disagreement exists on the reading of a text, but also texts that have that follow different conventions, because the history of the discipline, the tradition of the discipline is different. This often enough happens between Semitic languages and classical languages, particularly Greek and Latin. So, and this doesn't create any conflict in this sense in Wikidata. So there is no need to kind of force one tradition into the other, or one tradition to follow the other, which is also, again, a very, very nice aspect of Wikidata. And then, again, the URL where the object is described. And the last thing just that I wanted to mention and I want to stress is the sectional identifiers. And this is particularly interesting because it's like it gives you a sense of how linked are the items in Wikidata and the kind of work we're doing, not just us, of course, but like how useful it is to point to external databases that are already out there and sources are already out there. And I can say, like, quite, again, like with pride, that we have successfully proposed the creation of believe, 4 properties that again point to external databases. So PHI, the Eilerberg database, the Klaus Lappi, and the US Epigraphy project. So again, this is another kind of perk of working with Wikidata.
Okay, so I think that does it. Just picking up on a couple of things that that Ilaria mentioned and that Monica mentioned before. Ilaria mentioned wiki projects. This is a place where you can have these kind of collaborative debates about, how modeling happens. So just to plug ourselves again, where we have a wiki project idea that folks are welcome to follow and to, ping into these conversations. There's also a wiki project antiquity that is more general. There's also one for epigraphy, and there is a new one for Roman provinces. On the wiki project idea, we have made public the work in progress data models that we're using for mapping the kinds of content that we're trying to keep our arms around. So we have a data model for buildings, for various classes of artifacts, inscriptions, as Ilaria was talking about, etc. And finally, if you have languages and are interested in getting involved with a collection, we are looking for folks who have Greek and Aramaic in particular, and would be interested in volunteering with us. So if you want to get your feet wet, we are a welcoming, collaborative community that would be happy to train you and shepherd you along in this journey with us.
And the water's lovely. Thank you both, and also Ilaria. I hope he's moving safely.
Thank you so much for having us.
Any final last minute questions or comments from anyone in the audience? I'm aware when I say that the 90% of the people watching this video this week will not be doing so live. So
Right.
if you're watching this later and we're no longer here to see your live comments, do feel free to drop us an email. I think we'd be very happy to hear from you.
Yeah, and there is, in any case, comments can be always put in on YouTube. I mean, so.
Oh, that's true.
Just in case. One thing, of course, wiki projects are fundamental, and so also for our students, the audience. So when you use Wikidata, try to consult these if they exist, these wiki project pages, because Wikidata is open. This is the fascinating component of it, but also the problem in the sense that, of course, anyone can access and edit entries. But this is what is happening. So yeah, so thank you for mentioning this, Anne.
Yeah, well, and I think, just to know that best practice is to, before you make big changes, to, figure out who has been editing in the background, and to see if there are wiki projects that pertain to the realm that you're interested in, and to ping those projects first, and to ask about, whether somebody has proposed such and so property, or knows of somebody else who has thought through the modeling of inscriptional content, or whatever it might be.
Exactly, not reinventing the wheel every time, but look what is happening in the community. And then, of course, every one of us can contribute. But this is fundamental, I think, for sustainability and many other things. Exactly.
Yeah, and the existence of these projects, and which is a particularly sort of organized way, but also the slightly less organized, just of interested individuals who might be keeping an eye on things, is one of the reasons why what could be a completely chaotic and anarchic community with millions of people editing Wikidata and Wikipedia could lead to just like non-stop vandalism. The fact that it doesn't, the fact that yes, vandalism happens on Wikipedia and probably on Wikidata too, but the reason it's not a problem is because it almost always gets fixed before you would notice it, because there are so many people out there who are using it. So contrast this to a very small wiki like the Digital Classicist Wiki, which I've talked about before. which, it's a very small community. It has a very small audience. If you were to vandalize it with, with an advert or some political propaganda or whatever else, almost no one would see it, so it wouldn't really be to your benefit. But if you vandalized it, it might be days or weeks before someone noticed that you had done so, and even longer before someone fixed it. And that makes it really difficult to run a community like that as openly as Wikipedia would be. And so as a result, the Digital Classics Wiki is not as open as Wikipedia. You need to have been confirmed as a human by an existing editor before you have editing rights. Whereas on Wikipedia, anybody can edit all the time, including bad actors. But because there are so many people who care about this, things do get caught pretty quickly, and they get fixed. And not only bad actors, right? I mean, you can edit something in a slightly inconsistent way. Someone else will come along and say that's really great, but I'm just going to make it more consistent. And that sort of thing does happen. Yeah, and the communities, the projects, really help with that. By actively meeting, by actively looking at things, by having bots that go out there and harvest the most recent changes and all sorts of things like this. They look at their favorite pages, which, it's very cool.
Yeah, well summarized, Gabby.
Yes.
Cool.
All
Yeah.
right.
Great.
Okay, well, if there's no immediate questions online, and if we don't have any questions for each other yet, then thank you both again very much. A quick reminder that next week's session is going to be on it's titled Publishing 3D, but I wish we'd thought to call it Experiencing 3D instead. So I think it's going to be about how you receive and how you consume 3D materials through things like virtual reality, augmented reality, Sketchfab online, and so forth. So please do come along next week for that session. I think it'll be very cool, especially the bits that I'm not talking about will be even cooler.
Great.
Cheers to you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Ciao.